There is a particular kind of exhaustion that has no name in any medical textbook, and yet almost every single person listening to these words right now has felt it settle into their bones like a slow, creeping frost. It is the exhaustion of explaining yourself. The exhaustion of defending a decision you already know was right. The exhaustion of watching a rumor twist your character into something unrecognizable, and feeling your fingers twitch toward the keyboard, toward the phone, toward some desperate act of correction. Because surely, if you just explain yourself clearly enough, the world will finally see you as you truly are. And so you type the message, you draft the response, you rehearse the confrontation in the shower, in the car, in the quiet moments before sleep, constructing perfect arguments for people who were never interested in hearing them in the first place. You post the update to prove your success. You announce the plan before it has even taken its first breath, because the applause of the announcement feels almost as good as the achievement itself. And then, inevitably, the exhaustion returns heavier than before, because you have just spent your only truly finite resource, your attention, your energy, your very life force, on something that changed nothing except your own peace of mind. What if I told you that the most powerful move available to you in this exact moment has nothing to do with speaking louder, working harder, or fighting back with greater force? What if the secret was not an action at all, but its precise opposite? 2,000 years ago, in a Rome dripping with intrigue, betrayal, and the constant hum of public judgment, a small group of philosophers discovered something that modern psychology is only now beginning to rediscover through the language of nervous system regulation and attention economics. They discovered that doing nothing, when done with total intention and iron discipline, is not weakness. It is not passivity. It is in fact the single most feared and most powerful weapon a human being can wield. This is not a life hack you will forget by next Tuesday. This is not a productivity trick borrowed from a business book written last year and forgotten the year after. This is a proven operating principle, tested in the crucible of exile, imprisonment, betrayal, and the collapse of empires, used by emperors, slaves, and statesmen alike to remain utterly unshakable while the world around them burned. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly how to wield it yourself. Let us begin with the man who perhaps understood this principle more completely than any other. A man who held more raw power in the palm of his hand than almost anyone in human history, and yet chose, again and again, silence over spectacle. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, commander of legions, a man whose single word could end lives or found cities, spent his quiet evenings not boasting of his conquests, but writing private reminders to himself, reminders that he never intended the world to see. In these pages, later gathered into what we now call meditations, he wrote something that should stop every single one of us cold. He reminded himself that he had the power to have no opinion about a thing, and to not let it disturb his mind, for things themselves have no natural power to form our judgments. Read that again. The emperor of the known world, a man who could crush his enemies with a gesture, understood that his true power lay not in his legions, but in his ability to withhold reaction. He understood that every single time he chose to respond to an insult, to a slight, to a political maneuver designed to provoke him, he was handing a piece of his sovereign mind over to another person for free, and he refused to do it. This is the first and perhaps most misunderstood principle we must excavate today, the dichotomy of control. It sounds simple when stated plainly, almost too simple to be the foundation of an entire philosophical system that has outlasted empires, religions, and languages. And yet its simplicity is precisely why it is so violently difficult to practice. The principle states that everything in existence can be divided into two categories, and only two. There are things that are entirely within your control, which Epictetus, the former slave-turned-philosopher, who perhaps articulated this idea most sharply of all, identified as your judgments, your impulses, your desires, and your aversions, in short, everything that is truly your own doing. And then there is everything else, your reputation, other people's opinions of you, the outcome of your business venture, the health of your body, the actions of your enemies, the weather on the day of your wedding, All of it, every single external circumstance without exception, lies entirely outside the walls of your genuine control. No matter how desperately you convince yourself otherwise, consider for a moment how much of your daily suffering, if you are honest with yourself in this quiet moment, stems not from events themselves, but from your furious, exhausting insistence on controlling things that were never yours to control in the first place. You did not create the driver who cut you off in traffic. You cannot force a colleague to acknowledge your effort. You cannot compel a stranger on the internet to understand the full context of your life. Before they type their cruel judgment and move on with their day, likely forgetting you within the hour while you lie awake replaying their words at 3 in the morning. Epictetus, who had lived through actual slavery, who had felt an actual master break his leg, and calmly watched, according to legend, remarking only that the leg was now broken, understood something that most free men never grasp in their entire lives. He understood that a man can be chained at the ankle and still possess a mind more free than any senator's, so long as that man has thoroughly internalized which things belong to him and which do not. This is why silence and strategic withdrawal are not signs of a defeated spirit, but signs of a spirit that has finally stopped squandering its currency on things it can never purchase. When you feel the overwhelming urge to respond to every criticism, to correct every misunderstanding, to announce every plan before it is complete, what you are actually experiencing is a mind that has not yet drawn the line between what is yours and what is not. The critic's opinion of you is not yours. It belongs entirely to them, shaped by their own insecurities, their own history, their own limited vantage point, which will never, no matter how eloquently you argue, fully encompass the truth of who you are. And so the moment you engage, the moment you rush to defend, you are not protecting your territory. You are stepping willingly into theirs, fighting a battle on ground you were never meant to occupy, expending resources you can never fully recover. There is a story, perhaps apocryphal in its precise details, but philosophically true in its substance, about how the Stoics viewed the practice of withholding announcement, what we might today call strategic scarcity. In the ancient world, before a general marched to war, before a statesman proposed a new law, there was enormous social pressure to declare intentions loudly, to gather supporters through spectacle, to build momentum through public proclamation. And yet the wisest strategists, the ones history remembers as truly formidable rather than merely loud, understood the immense tactical advantage of silence. An enemy who does not know your plan cannot prepare a counter to it. A rival who does not know the scope of your ambition cannot mobilize allies against it in time. And perhaps most importantly, a mind that has not spent its energy explaining and justifying a plan to an audience still has the full reservoir of that energy available to actually execute the plan itself. Think of how differently we behave today in an age that has weaponized the impulse toward premature announcement. We live inside an architecture specifically engineered to extract our reactions, engineered by minds far more sophisticated than the manipulators of ancient Rome ever were. Every notification is a small provocation, a tiny hook designed to pull your attention away from your own considered judgment and into someone else's carefully constructed narrative. Every comment section is a coliseum, and the crowd is baying for you to step into the arena and perform outrage, performance defense, or public triumph, because your reaction, your engagement, is the only currency that matters to the machine surrounding you. The Stoics could not have imagined smartphones or algorithms, and yet their diagnosis of the human condition anticipated this exact trap with startling precision. They understood that the untrained mind is porous, permeable, endlessly available to be hijacked by any sufficiently loud external stimulus, and they dedicated their entire philosophical practice to the forging of an internal fortress, a citadel of judgment so solid that no external provocation could breach its walls without the mind's own consent. This is the deeper truth hidden inside the idea of doing nothing. It is not truly nothing. It is, in fact, one of the most demanding and disciplined acts a human being can perform, because our default biological wiring screams for us to react. When someone insults you, Ancient survival mechanisms flood your body with the same chemical signals that once prepared your ancestors to fight a physical predator. Your heart rate climbs, your jaw tightens. Every fiber of your nervous system is begging you to do something, anything, to neutralize the perceived threat immediately. And so the choice to remain still, to let the provocation pass through you like wind through an open window, rather than crashing against you like a wave against a rock, requires a level of internal mastery that most people never even attempt to cultivate in an entire lifetime. This is precisely why the Stoics considered it not passivity, but the highest form of active strength, a strength so refined that it appears, to the untrained eye, indistinguishable from indifference. Marcus Aurelius faced this test daily, surrounded as he was by flatterers who wanted his favor and enemies who wanted his ruin, both of them equally eager to provoke a visible reaction they could then exploit. He wrote to himself, in words meant for no audience but his own conscience, that the best revenge is to not be like your enemy, and that he must never let the behavior of others infect his own inner citadel, no matter how grievous their conduct. This was not resignation. This was the deliberate, disciplined refusal to hand his emotional sovereignty to anyone who had not earned it, and almost no one, in his estimation, had earned it. He understood that every single time a ruler reacts visibly to an insult, he confirms to his enemies exactly which levers control him, exactly which strings to pull the next time they wish to manipulate his behavior. But a ruler, or a person, who reveals nothing, who absorbs provocation without visible disturbance, becomes something far more dangerous to those who wish to control him. He becomes unpredictable. He becomes, in the truest sense, ungovernable by anyone but himself. And this brings us to the heart of what we are truly exploring today. A principle so counter to our modern instincts that it will likely feel uncomfortable, even as you recognize its truth. We have been conditioned by culture, by algorithm, by the relentless noise of a world that profits from our reactivity, to believe that power looks like volume, that strength looks like immediate response. That value must be constantly announced, defended and displayed, or else it risks being forgotten entirely. But the Stoics, tested in circumstances far more brutal than anything most of us will ever face, arrived at the opposite conclusion through hard, painful experience. They discovered that the calm, silent, undisturbed mind is not a mind that has given up the fight. It is a mind that has already won a far deeper battle, the battle against its own compulsive need to be seen, to be validated, to be understood by people who were never going to extend that understanding in the first place. In the section ahead, we will go much deeper into exactly how to build this internal fortress for yourself, examining the precise mental techniques the Stoics used to remain immune to criticism, to transform devastating obstacles into raw fuel for growth, and to cultivate the kind of radical self-discipline that allowed men in chains to feel freer than kings. We will explore what the philosophers meant when they spoke of amor fati, the love of one's fate, and why the ability to disappear from public judgment entirely might be the single most underused form of power available to you in this very moment. But before we continue, sit for a moment with what has already been said. Consider how much of your own daily suffering has come not from the world itself, but from your furious insistence on controlling a reputation, an outcome, or an opinion that was never yours to command. The frost of that exhaustion begins to melt the instant you stop reaching for what was never within your grasp. There is an old distinction the Stoics drew that I want you to hold carefully in your mind as we move forward, because it will unlock everything that follows. They separated the world into what happens to you and what you do with what happens to you. They insisted, with a conviction that cost some of them their lives, that only the second category ever truly belonged to a human being. Epictetus taught his students that circumstances themselves are neutral, that it is never the event but our judgment about the event that disturbs us, and this teaching found perhaps its most harrowing proof 3 centuries later in the life of a Viennese psychiatrist who had never read a page of Epictetus but arrived through unimaginable suffering at precisely the same conclusion. Viktor Frankl, stripped of his clothing, his name, his family, and every external marker of his identity inside a concentration camp, discovered that even there, even in a place engineered specifically to annihilate the human spirit, one freedom remained entirely beyond the reach of his captors. He could not choose his circumstances. He could not choose the cold, the hunger, or the cruelty surrounding him on every side. But he could choose, moment by moment, the attitude he brought to those circumstances. And in that single remaining freedom, he found something the guards could never touch, something they could never confiscate, no matter how thoroughly they stripped away everything else. This is the dichotomy of control in its most extreme and most instructive form. And if it can hold true inside a concentration camp, then surely it can hold true inside your inbox, your comment section, and your difficult conversation with a family member who will never fully understand you. Radical self-discipline, the second great pillar we must examine, is built entirely upon this foundation, because discipline is nothing more than the consistent, repeated choice to act in accordance with your judgment rather than your impulse. The untrained mind experiences a craving, whether for a certain food, a certain purchase, a certain moment of validation, and immediately mistakes that craving for a command that must be obeyed. But the Stoics understood something that modern neuroscience now confirms through careful study of the prefrontal cortex and its relationship to the more primitive reactive centers of the brain. An impulse is not a command. It is merely information, a signal that can be observed, examined, and ultimately overruled by a mind that has trained itself to pause between stimulus and response. Seneca, the great Roman statesman and philosopher, who advised an emperor and eventually died by that same emperor's order, wrote extensively to his friend Lucilius about the practice of examining each day before it began, and again before sleep claimed it, asking himself what weakness he had conquered that day, what temptation he had resisted, in what way he had grown sturdier than the day before. This was not self-flagellation. This was maintenance, the same disciplined maintenance a soldier gives his weapon or a craftsman gives his tools, because Seneca understood that the mind, left unattended, does not remain neutral. It softens. It drifts toward comfort, toward the path requiring the least resistance, and that softening, left unchecked for years, eventually produces a person who cannot delay a single gratification, who cannot sit with a single moment of discomfort, who has become, in the truest sense, a slave to every fleeting whim that passes through his own skull. Consider the discipline required simply to delay a response you desperately want to send. Consider the discipline required to work in complete silence toward a goal that no one else knows exists, receiving no praise, no encouragement, no external validation whatsoever, sustained only by your own private commitment to the outcome. This is precisely the discipline the Stoics prized above almost every other virtue, because they recognized that a person capable of this kind of sustained, unwitnessed effort had achieved something far rarer than talent or intelligence. They had achieved sovereignty over their own mind, and once that sovereignty is established, external circumstances lose almost all their power to derail a person's chosen path. The alcoholic who has truly mastered this discipline does not white-knuckle his way past every bar he passes, engaged in constant internal warfare. He has restructured his relationship to the impulse itself, observing it with the same detached curiosity Marcus Aurelius brought to an insult hurled by a senator, recognizing the craving as a passing sensation rather than an inescapable command. This is the quiet, invisible labor that precedes every visible achievement worth having, and it is precisely the labor our current culture, addicted to instant gratification and immediate feedback, has almost entirely forgotten how to perform. Let us turn now to the third pillar, immunity to criticism, because I suspect this is the one that will resonate most painfully with many of you listening. There is a particular kind of paralysis that comes from caring too deeply what strangers think of you, a paralysis that has quietly strangled more ambitions, more honest conversations, and more authentic lives than almost any other single psychological trap in existence. The Stoics diagnosed this trap with startling clarity nearly 2,000 years before social media turned it into a permanent, inescapable condition of daily life. Epictetus taught that if a man speaks ill of you, you should not defend yourself against his accusations, but rather respond by saying that he clearly does not know your other faults, or else he would have mentioned those as well. This is not merely clever rhetoric. It reveals a profound psychological shift, a complete relocation of the source of one's self-worth from the external gallery of public opinion to the internal court of one's own conscience. The Stoics asked a piercing question that remains just as piercing today. Why would you grant another human being, a person who does not know your struggles, your history, your private battles fought in silence, the authority to determine your worth, when that same person cannot even manage the affairs of their own single life with any particular wisdom? Marcus Aurelius, again and again in his private writings, returned to this exact theme, reminding himself that when men revile him or hate him, or say certain things against him, he must go to their poor souls and see what sort of men they are, understanding that they act only according to what appears right to them, however mistaken that appearance might be. There is something almost startlingly compassionate hidden inside this Stoic response to criticism, because it does not ask you to hate your critics or to descend into bitter resentment against them. It asks you to see them clearly, to understand that their judgment of you says infinitely more about their own limited perspective, their own unresolved wounds, their own narrow window onto the world, than it could ever say about your actual character. And once you see this clearly, truly clearly, the sting begins to dissolve, not because you have become numb or cold, but because you have finally stopped mistaking noise for truth. The critic in the comment section knows nothing of the years of quiet labor behind your work. The family member who dismisses your ambitions knows nothing of the private conversations you have had with yourself at 4 in the morning, wrestling with doubt and choosing, again and again, to continue anyway. Their opinion, however loudly voiced, remains fundamentally uninformed, and an uninformed judgment, no matter how painful it feels in the moment, deserves no seat at the table where you determine your own worth. This immunity to criticism connects directly back to the strategic silence we explored earlier, because the person who has genuinely internalized this teaching finds an entirely new kind of power available to them, the power of simply not responding at all. Not out of weakness, not out of an inability to construct a clever rebuttal, but out of a settled, almost serene recognition that the rebuttal would change nothing except to signal to everyone watching exactly which buttons still control your behavior. There is a particular kind of dignity in refusing to explain yourself to people who were never going to listen with genuine openness in the first place, a dignity the Stoics cultivated as deliberately as an athlete cultivates strength through repeated, disciplined training. And here is the deeper secret hidden inside this practice, one that very few people ever discover because they abandon the practice before it has time to mature within them. The less you explain, the less you defend, the less you perform your worth for an audience of strangers, the more that worth becomes genuinely, unshakably your own, rooted so deeply in your own private judgment that no external storm can uproot it. We arrive now at the final and perhaps most transformative pillar of everything we have discussed today, the principle the Stoics called amor fati, the love of one's fate. This is not mere acceptance, which implies a grudging tolerance of what cannot be changed. This is something far more radical and far more powerful. It is the deliberate choice to love what has happened, to embrace even the most painful obstacle as necessary raw material for your own growth, rather than as an enemy to be resented. Marcus Aurelius articulated the mechanism behind this practice with startling precision when he wrote that the impediment to action advances action, and that what stands in the way becomes the way. Read that carefully, because it contains an entire philosophy compressed into a single sentence. The obstacle is not separate from the path. The obstacle is the path. Every setback, every betrayal, every moment of public humiliation or private failure contains within it the exact raw material required for the next phase of your own development, provided you are willing to extract that material rather than simply drowning in resentment over its arrival. Consider the life of Epictetus once more, a man born into slavery, his very body once broken by a master's cruelty, a man who by every external measure available in his era possessed nothing, no freedom, no status, no wealth, no control over his own physical circumstances. And yet this same man became one of the most influential teachers in the entire history of Western philosophy, his words eventually reaching and transforming the mind of an actual Roman emperor generations after his own death. How does a man with nothing become a man whose wisdom outlasts empires? He does it precisely by refusing to treat his external circumstances as the final verdict on his internal life. His slavery was not chosen. His mind's response to that slavery was entirely, completely his own, and in that narrow space of remaining freedom, he built something that has now survived for nearly 2,000 years, something you are benefiting from in this exact moment as these words reach you. This is amor fati in its most extreme demonstration, the recognition that even the cruelest circumstances contain within them the seed of a wisdom that comfortable, untested lives can never produce. This does not mean the Stoics taught passive resignation in the face of genuine injustice, a common and unfortunate misreading of their philosophy that deserves correction here. They did not counsel indifference to wrongdoing or acceptance of cruelty as somehow noble in itself. What they taught instead was the refusal to add unnecessary suffering on top of necessary suffering, the recognition that pain is often inevitable, but that the additional layer of resentment, of bitter rumination, of endless replaying the injustice in your mind remains entirely optional, entirely within your own control to release. The obstacle happens, that much you cannot always prevent. But whether that obstacle becomes a source of permanent bitterness or a source of hard-won strength depends entirely on the judgment you bring to it. And that judgment, as we have established throughout this entire exploration, belongs to you and you alone. So let us bring these four pillars together now, because separately they are powerful, but woven together they form something genuinely transformative. The dichotomy of control teaches you to stop wasting your finite energy on outcomes and opinions that were never yours to command in the first place. Radical self-discipline teaches you to master the gap between impulse and action, building an internal fortress through the quiet, unwitnessed repetition of small, disciplined choices. Immunity to criticism teaches you to relocate your sense of worth away from the shifting, uninformed judgments of strangers and back into your own considered conscience, where it was always meant to reside. And amor fati teaches you to receive even your most painful obstacles not as enemies to be resented, but as raw material to be transformed, the exact wood from which your own strength is carved. Together, these principles produce the exact posture we began this exploration with, the posture of strategic silence, of disappearing from the noise, of doing what appears to the untrained eye to be nothing at all, while in truth you are engaged in the most demanding and most powerful discipline a human mind can undertake. The next time you feel that familiar urgent pull to explain yourself to someone who has already made up their mind, to announce a plan before it has had the chance to grow strong roots, to react instantly to a provocation designed specifically to extract that exact reaction from you, I want you to remember the emperor writing quietly to himself, by lamplight, reminding no one but his own conscience that he possessed the power to have no opinion about the thing troubling him, and to let his mind remain undisturbed. I want you to remember that this power is not reserved for emperors or ancient philosophers. It is available to you in this exact moment, in whatever circumstance you find yourself, because it was never a matter of your external position. It was always, only ever, a matter of where you choose to place your attention, your energy, and your judgment. The frost of that old exhaustion, the one we began with, the exhaustion of explaining, defending, and performing for an audience that was never truly watching with the attention you imagined, begins to melt the moment you stop reaching for what was never yours to hold. Choose stillness. Choose silence where silence serves you. Choose the discipline of the unwitnessed effort. And in doing so, discover the strange, quiet, unshakable power of a mind that has finally truly learned how to do nothing at all.